What is this Adobe Illustrator course all about? So I've taken some of the most advanced and useful tricks, tips, and hidden features in Adobe Illustrator from the past 2 to 3 years of content on my channel. And then I've categorized them into useful, handy segments for easier viewing. Now, let's design. Now the first one is to send to the back, which is Shift Command bracket, and then of course the PC variation. Now this saves just so much time, and so does the opposite of that one, which is bring to the front. It saves you having to come up to the object drop down menu at the top, and during long workflows this just makes heaps of sense. So now the snake is actually behind the background layer, and I can actually keep editing and manipulating it freely. Some keyboards might not even have this key, but the symbol we're looking for is called the back quote. On my keyboard it is below the tilde symbol, which is that curvy-like thing right here. Anyway, press Command and back quote or Control and back quote, and this will toggle between different windows in Illustrator. This will save you time having to click through many different documents when you do have a busy workload on the go. So here we have a fresh looking gorilla who quite frankly is managing to rock the sunglasses better than I ever could. But behind him is a circle, and we can easily go ahead and click that circle. But sometimes in Adobe Illustrator we end up having complex designs with many objects stacked on top of each other. If you want to easily click the object below, hold down the Command or the Control key, click just once, and then click again to select the object below. You can then make adjustments in terms of color, rotation, size, location, and everything else that we like to do as designers. You'll find that it's pretty handy in a lot of different situations in Adobe Illustrator. We know that if you copy something and then paste it with a Command or Control V, it kind of just pastes it in an annoying location. You might want to paste the object directly, exactly behind the copied version. So press Command or Control B for back. Again, the more you know, the more efficient you can be when using design software, and this one is a really neat addition to your knowledge. So the alternative, which I've been using for ages actually, is Command or Control F, and this will paste a copy directly over the top. But here's another really cool thing that we can do with the Alt Option key. This circle has several stroke effects applied to it, and it's just a single vector shape. So come into the layers window and you'll be able to copy any effects from the circle layer onto another one by holding down, yes you've guessed it, the Alt Option key. Notice the plus icon above my cursor when I do this. And there, instantly copy things over to this layer just like that. So here's a quick trick that few designers know about. I have a stroked path, but if I come up to change the width profile to something else, we can do something pretty interesting with it. Now I can press P for the pen tool and then click one side of the path to reverse the direction. But the path doesn't have to be like a cone. No, we can actually press Shift and W for the width tool and then play around with the ends of the stroke. And the trick will actually work in the exact same way as before. Now these two purple diamonds are in fact just holes cut into the shape. If we want to make any changes to them, like we've done before in the video, just press A for the direct selection tool and click one anchor point. Then you just press V for the selection tool, and we can now make changes and edits to the cutout holes. And that sort of makes the destructive workflow less destructive, kind of, I guess. But we can even do things like use the Alt Option key to duplicate and make other holes in our shape, which is pretty neat. And yes, I know, these aren't spaced out equally and it's annoying me as well, yeah. But for this trick, let's copy this right here with Command or Control C. Zooming out, I have multiple artboards, and if you want to copy something to all of your artboards at the same time, press Command or Control, Shift, Alt and V. This will then paste whatever you've copied onto multiple artboards at once. The duplicates won't take into consideration the board dimension or size, meaning if you have a smaller board like so, the duplication will hang over the edges. Say if I wanted to take this CTA call to action here and I want to use a color sample from the gradient, If I do that, I will actually sample the entire gradient, which is annoying because I don't want that. Instead, hold down Shift and then sample your color. And now you're actually going to sample a precise color. Sure, the CTA looked better before in blue, but this is just a demonstration. So I love this tip. Often when we really get into a creative zone, we end up making multiple different artboards on one AI design document. When we come to save this document, we can, however, use an option that will save each of these artboards as separate different AI files. And that's found here when you go to Save As and then hit Save. This obviously is useful for sending files to your clients or other designers and just being organized in general. And as you can see in my folder, here are my 3 samurais that I saved earlier. These samurais are pretty cool, and sure, they would take ages to make in Adobe Illustrator, but there is something that doesn't exist in Adobe Illustrator, and that is the Sketch to Image function. Enter OpenArt with an array of powerful artificial intelligence tools, but like I said, specifically I find this Sketch to Image tool really useful. OpenArt has other tools as well, such as creative variations on your designs, stock image transformer, custom stock image generator, the magic brush, a QR code generator, and more coming soon. But today, let's see if we can do some useful and cool things with the Sketch to Image tool. The way to use the Sketch to Image tool is to first upload a sketch or just anything that resembles something of your idea of your concept. And as you can see here, I have a very crude drawing of a samurai. And it really doesn't have to be a masterpiece, as you can see obviously. The AI on OpenArt is very good at creating decent, usable images from things just like this. Once uploaded, this box is where we type in some brief information on what we want the final outcome to look like. So for the first prompt, let's just generate a traditional samurai on a mountain. The creativity slider is something we'll look at a bit later, as well as these style settings here. But below that, we have some color nodes that we can actually dictate the main color theme for our design or our image. But for the first result, let's just pump this one out here as it is. And the results often render in between 10 and 15 seconds, which is actually quite fast. So as you can see, the face is a bit distorted here, but that's mainly down to my weirdly drawn face on the sketch. Everything else looks pretty decent, but I do want to take things a bit further. So let's change things to a futuristic cyberpunk kind of samurai. And for now, we are going to leave these other settings alone, for now. And as you can see, OpenArt has taken the same sketch, but the prompt has totally changed the final outcome. We now have some badass cyberpunk samurais that are looking pretty cool. But I'm still not happy with the face. So, I'll tell you what, let's quickly mosey over to Photoshop and erase that face. This time, after having uploaded the new image, I've got the creative slider up somewhat, and this is so the AI can be more loose and more creative with the final solutions. And for the style, let's go for digital art on this one. And let's see what happens now that the AI has more creativity in the settings. So yeah, just look how crisp the backstreet looks on this design here. And the face is pretty decent as well. The second one though is pretty badass. Oh, we can also come in and make use of the variation settings here or change the upscale mode, which is pretty handy. But yeah, look how easy it is to make a decent image from a sketch in a matter of seconds. This is now ready to use on a design such as, well, this perhaps. And FYI, I'm not about to go and launch a bunch of NFTs, but you can try out OpenArt totally for free via the link in the description box below. But for now, let's head back into more Illustrator goodness. Let's say I'm working away on this design right here. First, let's hide the anchor point so we can actually see what we're designing. And that's with Command or Control H. The thing that people aren't aware of is up here, under View, and then navigate down to Trim. With this option selected, we now only see the artwork on the artboard itself, and this allows for us to clearly visualize our design without the clutter bleeding over those edges. We can actually still work on our design and turn off this setting at any point. Pretty cool, huh? And the first thing that we can really make use of in today's tutorial is with the scale tool, which is S on your keyboard. Or of course, you can come over to here in the tool panel. Now with this tool selected, we can press enter on your keyboard, which will take us to this very nifty little panel. And you'll soon see how much potential this single panel has. Now I have a rectangle covering my entire artboard, and sometimes we want to make multiple shapes across our designs at the exact same size. So for example, I can press 25% for the horizontal number, and now my shape is exactly a quarter of my artboard or my design. I can then just hold down the Alt Option key and click and drag to duplicate this shape, before pressing Command or Control D to repeat it twice more. And if by magic, these 4 shapes fit exactly onto my artboard up to the edges. If you come up to Object, Artboards, and then rearrange all artboards, a very handy dandy window is going to appear. Now we have a setting for the left to right or up to down orientations, how many rows we want, and also the spacing between each artboards. You will likely want to move the artwork as well, but you might run into a small issue like this, where something hasn't moved with your artboard, and that's simply because it was locked. Pressing Alt Option as well as Command or Control and then 2 will unlock everything on your document, and then you should just have no worries moving stuff around. You cannot seriously deny how much neater and visually pleasing things look right now. Next, if you want to actually duplicate a design asset, you'd either use the blend tool or you copy, duplicate, repeat. However, this is the old way to do things. Illustrator has something really cool found under Object and then Repeat. There are 3 options here, but let's quickly take a look at Grid first. So we have this cool box of our duplication, but let's pop open the settings menu. Now here we can adjust the spacing between our objects. And then here we can also change the arrangement, which is pretty cool. We can end up with a neat looking design just like this in a matter of just seconds. But what about that radial option? This is something I wanted to see in Illustrator for ages and ages and ages. Our circle is now positioned in a radius, and we can go into the settings menu as before and make further adjustments. And take a look at this here. Spirograph, anybody? All we have to do is flip the fill over to a stroke and bingo, that's looking pretty fresh. A lot of the time in Adobe Illustrator, it's about being 100% precise, and that's where the next tip comes in handy. I have a design here that is symmetrical, and a lot of the time we want anchor points to be exactly in the same position in Illustrator. Which if I zoom in here and slap on the outline mode of Command or Control Y, we can see they're slightly off. But not to worry, because I just press A for the direct selection tool, highlight the anchor points in question, and then head up to Object, Path, and Average. Here you can then select both and then click OK. And now the anchor points will be exactly in the same position down to the smallest scale. And by the way, this isn't actually a flower. No, it's 2 butterflies put together. Here's a quick tip. Say I have this circle here and I want to cut it in half or something like that. Usually I'd press C for the scissors tool and then click the anchor points and then delete it. But actually instead you can simply press A for the direct selection tool, then click, and then just press backspace on your keyboard. Of course, this works for all kinds of shapes, and let's just go ahead and round off the ends of this stroke, why not? I have 4 black squares, and on top of that I have this pinky red circle. Now I want to cut this circle into 4 squares, leaving negative space in the middle. If we select everything then hit the -1 option, bam, we get this. That's not ideal. Okay, so what if we group the black squares together? Do you think that will work? Command or Control G to group them, bring the shape back over, and nope, denied. The next logical thing to try maybe is to create a compound path from the 4 squares. So let's go ahead and do that in the Pathfinder panel. Now when I click the -1 option, nothing seems to happen at all. That's because we need to hold down the Alt Option key like we did before, crucially after we've turned the squares into a compound shape. This is how you cut a shape into multiple objects below using the Pathfinder. This trick will help you make color swatch groups really quickly. So take 2 colors that you want to use for your design or that you think might fit the brief. Then press W on your keyboard for the blend tool and then click each square to generate a blend. Then come into the blend options and we will select specified steps. The number of steps you use will dictate how many colors in your swatch group. We then need to expand the entire blend and finally ungroup it so we have the individual squares. This then leaves us with a possible swatch group for our project, and we just need to select them all and then add them into a swatch library like so. It's pretty straightforward and it's a quick way to make some swatch groups for your projects. Oh, also you didn't have to start with only 2 colors. You could also start with maybe 3 or 4 different colors and then go ahead and blend those together. Using more colors at the start will leave you with more options at the end, so you might have to be picky and a bit selective about which colors you bring into your swatch groups. The next example makes use of some random logo type thrown together and it's not an actual design, just so you know. But it does show a problem that you might encounter with your logo design workflow. This text box is so large that it takes over the entire logo type from the bottom. I can't select it because it's just in the way and overcrowding it. But if I come into the Illustrator preference settings, we can click the option where we only select text by the base line. And this means that we can navigate our design so much easier just by selecting the baseline of the logo type. I have some text right here, and let's say on this design I want my text to be the exact same size as this circle. We could outline the text or whatever else, but to remain non-destructive, let's first head into the properties panel for this circle, and we're going to copy the height with Command or Control C. Great, now we need to press Command or Control T to open up the characters panel and navigate over to the corner menu. We want to open up the height settings panel. And as you can see in the drop down menu, we have several different options open to us. Now the A on my Astro is an uppercase letter, so I'm going to use the select cap height option. We can then paste in the measurements, excluding the letters of course, and hit enter. So now my A will actually be the exact same size as my shape. Now you might notice that some of the letters won't be the exact same height, but most of them will be. Also of course, we cannot forget about entering into the Preferences Settings menu with Command or Control K. And then make sure our glyph smart guides are in fact activated. And by default, these things are green. But what they do is they allow you to align objects with typography, even though your typography isn't outlined. Instead of Illustrator trying to match an object to the letter bounding box, I can actually align things to the character itself without outlining it. This can help us match anything to our text size as well, and that helps those who don't want to mess around with numbers and copying and paste like we just saw. So here's a great trick that will save you time in Adobe Illustrator and will probably reduce stress, helping you to live a longer, more healthy life. A longer, healthy life is not guaranteed by Satori Graphics. The annoying problem is that when we are working on text, say for example here I'm reducing the spacing between my letters by holding down the Alt Option key and nudging the characters to the left or right. What if I want to navigate to a different place on my artboard? Well, normally we would hold down the spacebar and then click to drag, which is making use of the hand tool. But in this situation, pressing the spacebar just adds a space to my text. So instead, we can hold down the Alt Option key, which will switch to the hand tool while working on text. You can then hold down the Command or Control key to access the selection tool. This one really does help in a lot of different workflow situations, and I use it all the time. So when we want to add text along a path, there is a handy menu box found here that we can open up and have some fun with. This thing gives you a lot more scope for adjustment and freedom when creating typography along a path. And yeah, let's just ignore that typo for a second. So, this menu can dedicate where on the line the text is going to sit, which is probably the best part of this feature really. We can also change the leading for some reason, I don't know why, flip the text and also change the orientation to weird and wonderful layouts. And then to change the typo because yeah, it's starting to annoy me at this point as well. Now I would like to see some built-in method for knowing when the text is central, but instead we can pull down a guide from the rulers and do things that way. Now typically we would actually press V to select away from things, but you cannot do that with text because it just gives you a V. So instead, just simply hold down Command on a Mac or Control on a PC, and then just click away from your text. You can then hit V or whatever you want to use in terms of tools. For me, this just feels a lot easier and a lot quicker than coming over to the toolbar itself. This typography looks pretty decent, right? But what if you want to make something like this in a matter of just a few seconds? Well, it's pretty simple actually. Just click your text and head into the Appearance window. From the top right menu, add a new stroke and apply a color and a stroke weight. Now you might think that we just simply need to come and offset the path here. But looking at the actual outcome, yeah, this isn't going to jive. So we need to then come into the Effects tab and navigate to the Pathfinder and then click Add. This will clean up the unwanted areas. But there is still one small issue. Well, it's sort of a personal preference really. These sections right here, the negative space in the lettering, can be annoying, so let's just get rid of them. Come up to Object and expand Appearance, and then press A for the Direct Selection tool. Simply click the anchor point here and then press a backspace until you've deleted the unwanted areas. And now you've got some properly outlined stroke typography. Pretty cool, huh? The tip here is that if you hold down the Alt Option key as well as Shift, you will notice the Type tool changes to the Vertical Type tool. We can then switch between the Awake Type tool and the Unconscious Type tool, back and forth. I don't really use vertical type all that much on my designs, but it's there if you need it, and the shortcut is one that few know about or few remember. If we use the minus front option in the Pathfinder window, I cut the top shape into the shape below. The thing is that we can see in the layers window just here that we have just one shape. If I then go ahead and commit the same process, but this time if I hold down the Alt key on Windows or the Option key on a Mac, while clicking the Pathfinder function, I now have a genuine compound path. We can come into the Layers window and then click only the middle section with the blue icon, and then just manipulate the shape and the size in any which way we want to. This isn't a coloured circle, you are literally seeing through the shape onto the background, and I can demonstrate that right here. If you want the same gradient across both shapes, obviously it's not going to work this way. Pressing G and using the gradient slider only works on the circle. Instead of uniting in the Pathfinder window, we can create a compound shape in the Pathfinder window. And then you can apply your gradient along the entire selection, while they're all individual shapes. And let's go vertical here for maybe a cool abstract sunset or sunrise. Now I'm going to apply a stroke weight of 10. Lovely, okay, so now by pressing C for the scissors tool, let's click these two anchor points here and then press delete to remove the lower half of our circle. We're going to apply the same effect as the line in the top right corner of the screen, and to do that we need to jump into the Appearance panel. Now instead of just clicking a new stroke, you can simply hold down the Alt Option key and then click and drag below. But we also want to increase the stroke weight by only 20 points for this new stroke, so that means it's going to be 30. Now I'm using the background color for this new stroke. Okay, now we need to hold down the Command or the Control key and click the two strokes, and then like before, just hold down the Alt Option key and duplicate them below like so. Now the really cool thing that we can do with this design, or any shape in Illustrator for that matter, starts by opening up the Pathfinder window. Now if you click the top right option, we can convert this to a compound shape. Now Illustrator is going to join together the shape because a compound shape needs an enclosed path to work. Now if I duplicate the shape, things are as what you would expect. However, if we double click the shape and enter into the isolation mode, and then we copy the shape with Command or Control C, and then paste it with Command or Control V, we can see that our compound shapes unite in some form of kind of wizardry. And we can actually manipulate them in any way we want to and add multiple copies of our design, flip them, rotate them, and so on. And this is all while we only have single vector paths. Now you can click the top grey bar to enter out of isolation mode. But yeah, this process can be applied to pretty much any shape that you want in Illustrator, and you can really have some fun with this and come up with some interesting designs when using compound shapes in this way. Some people, for whatever reason, find their center points have disappeared, and it's often because this setting has been changed somewhere along the lines. So on the design, I have two center points, one for the large square and another one for the center of the smaller shape at the bottom where it was originally a square before I cut it out. And the bottom left segment is in fact cut into the larger square. So let's head into the outline mode with Command or Control Y and we can make use of these center points. So again, I'm going to use the group selection tool and I can actually click the smaller shape of the compound path and then press R for the rotate tool. Notice how it snapped to that center point, and this means I can actually hold down the Alt Option key and then click the center, allowing me to perform precise rotations. Once you have your design, select it and hold down the Alt Option key and click and drag to duplicate it like so. 2 copies works just fine, but you might want to try 3. The vector design that we're going to make is that wrapped text layout, but since the latest Adobe Illustrator update, the workflow method is slightly different. It begins by opening up the symbols panel and then simply dragging and dropping your design into it like so. Give your symbol a name, but if you're feeling lazy, just mash the keyboard. We can now move this design out of the way and then press M for the rectangle tool. In my experience, a thinner rectangle works best. Ideally, thinner than this one here, to be honest. We're going to revolve our rectangle around a 360 degrees rotation, so we end up with a cylinder shape like this. And like I said, this is the method for the most recent update of Adobe Illustrator. You then come into the materials section, and before the update, we would just use the map artwork function, but now we come up to the graphics tab and locate our symbol that we just made. Now it's looking pretty pixelated and ugly, but that will soon change later. With the symbol box selected and the invisible geometry checked, you can now edit and scale the rotation of the text around the cylinder shape. I think 2 sections of my typography design would work better than 3, but you can experiment with your design and what works best for you. It's also important to remember that you can control the quality output in the ray tracing section. The higher you put the quality, the longer rendering times you will experience. I know it's pretty much catch-22 and it does suck. But we can rotate and position the design like so, and then another setting you need to be aware of is the document raster effects settings. High 300 ppi will show your design in the best quality possible, but again, things will be slower to render. So it's best to work in 72 ppi and then switch it up to 300 for the final render output. And finally, you can expand the appearance, and this will prevent your computer from slowing down when moving or scaling your design. I'm not sure why I typed 2020 on this design, but hey, it is what it is. And let's move on to vector design number 2. And to demonstrate, we have here a golden hand. And firstly, we need to look at where the light is coming from on our object. And to me, it seems like it's from the left side of the design where the light source would probably be. So my shadow is probably going to point and move towards the right of my design in some kind of way. So let's press L for the ellipse tool and then create a shape like so. Now we're going to add a gradient, but the next few steps are very, very important. For one side of your gradient, make sure it's a dark kind of black, and I've gone for a more charcoal kind of black here as opposed to jet black. But for the opposite side of the gradient, we want to sample the background color by pressing I on your keyboard and then just sampling the color. Then heading into the color here, we can copy the hex code with Command or Control C. Now, head back to the gradient and paste in the hex code into the RGB slider with Command or Control V. We want this side of the gradient to either be 0% opacity or for it just to be a low kind of percent. Make sure your object is to the front of all layers and then add a Gaussian blur to your ellipse. Now you might be thinking to yourself, that's it, shadow complete. Often when working with raster effects like this in Illustrator, we have unfavorable edges like you can see at the very top edge right here. The best workaround for this is to add a feather effect, which can be found up here at the top. While you're doing this, click preview and have a look at what kind of values work best for your shadow, and then when you're ready, just hit OK. The great thing about this is that we can edit the shape and even the gradient after having added the blur effect. You might even want to add a second darker blur kind of closer to the hand for extra depth. Now we obviously need some text for our text effect, so press T for the type tool and then type out your text. Now I'm just showing you guys this effect with one letter today, but you can of course use as many as you want. Now today's Illustrator text effect can be achieved by using various different methods, and in fact some months ago I showcased a very similar effect using the transparency window and the transparency effects. But today we're going to be exploring a different method instead of the transparency window. So we need to outline the text, and I am aware this is destructive workflow, but today we're working with vector shapes and not actual editable text. Now press I for the eyedropper tool and sample the lighter of your two colours. And then press M for the rectangle tool. We're now going to make a gradient using these two colours, so go ahead and apply a gradient overlay. The technique here is fairly simple. Select your colour by double clicking it in the colour palette, and then copy the hex colour code at the very bottom by pressing Command or Control C. Then double click the darker side of your gradient and make sure that you're using RGB as the colour mode, because we want to paste in the hex colour code with Command or Control V. Now do the same on the other side with your gradient and your second colour choice. We're nearly ready to complete the text effect in Illustrator, so stay tuned. When you are ready, copy your lettering with Command or Control C, and then paste a duplicate right over the top with Command or Control F. In the Layers window, we now need to hide the lower text layer like so. There are several different ways to perform the next step, and you can simply draw in your sections, or you can cut them out from the duplicate like I'm going to show you now. So press P for the pen tool and then draw an area that you want to cut out. Hold down Shift and then select the letter as well, and use the intersect option in the Pathfinder window. Now you can use the eyedropper tool to sample the gradient above and adjust the gradient direction and the strength using the sliders. Also, you can press G for the gradient tool and just simply draw the direction and the strength of your gradient. The gradient tool is really awesome, so I suggest you use that. Now activate the hidden layer in the Layers window so you can see your text effect in real time. And as you can see, I need to blend mine in a bit more because it's not very good at the moment. Of course, you can also use the pen tool and make sure one side of your gradient is 0% opacity. Then simply just draw in your shading over the top of the lettering and adjust your gradient as you see fit. So we can make responsive labels or buttons, and to do that, first take some text and apply a color of your choice. You then need to open up the appearance panel. In the top right, select a new fill, and this will be our button. We need to apply an effect, and that is to convert to a rounded rectangle. In the new window, we simply adjust the roundness of the corners by nudging your arrow keys on your keyboard, and holding down Shift kind of speeds that up by 10 times. We also can adjust the width and the height too. Now, the responsive aspect of this design is that we can edit the text, and the label or the button will change in accordance to our text. This typography is a pretty poor choice, but yeah, you get the idea. So the cool thing that we can do is to grab some text or just about anything else really, select it plus the shape, and then come into the Pathfinder menu, hold down the Alt or Option key, and then use the intersect option. In a matter of seconds, we have some text superimposed onto a raster PNG, but it doesn't stop there. The cool thing here is that the text itself is still editable and it will stay within the side of the cube.